Welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Brightman and happy to have David Anderson returning for Iowa on Saturday, 3:30 Eastern Time on the Big Ten Network. Rutgers traveling to Iowa City for a huge opportunity to make a statement and get a signature win. David, thanks so much for being back.
Appreciate it as always. Looking forward to the game.
So let's just start briefly. Any thoughts on the Ohio State performance? Obviously a disappointing end, but some encouraging things as well.
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of these points have been made by local and even national media. The fact that Rutgers was able to run the ball in Ohio State was pretty much shocking, how well they did with that. But a lot of that came from just throwing the ball enough and Ohio State not wanting to get beat deep, right? And so that, and then Kyle Monangai, just like we talked about in the preview, just they didn't want to tackle him at times. I mean, even Desmond Igbinosun, or I'm sorry, which brother? Davison Igbinosun made the tackle on him when Isaiah Washington was getting criticized for his poor block. But I don't even, if I was blocking, I don't even know what Igbinosun was doing on that. Like, it was as if he was out for a jog too. And then it was just kind of a strange situation. But ultimately, that tackle was huge because Rutgers had to settle for a field goal. And we can talk all we want about how, settling for field goal is not good enough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, everyone has to be pleased with just Rutgers did more on offense than we could never expect. And when your running game is that good, then you shouldn't pass the ball too much more. And then I was totally fine with the decision to make that pass that ultimately led to a pick six because, I mean, sure, the law of averages would say you're not going to throw 3 pick sixes like in your 3 biggest games of the season, like in that manner. I mean, sure, the Wisconsin one was kind of they jumped a route, but this Ohio State and Michigan was just like a bounce of the ball and like a little bit of luck. You can't play scared like that. You have to take those shots. And in that situation, they had the lead. So it was the right time to try to go with a play that you had been practicing. Ohio State was totally going to like suck up on the fact that he was blocking. And there was a window to throw that pass. It was small, but that's the type of plays that you're going to have to make. And even then, you didn't expect them to return it for a touchdown. Let's say Ohio State just more likely the ball would be incomplete, or even if it's intercepted, you would assume that the guy would fall down diving for it and you wouldn't even have to tackle him. So a lot of like weird things like that, but it was very exciting. And Rutgers defense held up really well. I mean, you shut down 2 possible NFL first round draft picks in Harrison and Ibuka. I know Ibuka was coming off of injury, never really got going, but I mean, I don't know what else you can say about how good Rutgers played. They played defensively, the game plan you needed to play. And really, it's that Travion Henderson 65-yard catch and run that everyone's talked about. Maybe if Tyrann Powell's in there, it's a different story. Or Jabomi with another year of experience is going to make that play. I don't know. Like that. But once he got off to the races, that was kind of a play. But then Rutgers didn't quit either. If Ian Strong catches that pass, it's 28-23, right?
Yep.
Right. And then you've been stopping him. So it was really exciting to watch and probably a lot more exciting than this game this weekend might be. So there's that.
Yeah, all great points. I agree. I do agree with you. And I said this previously. I thought, people that saying they were running it down their throat, they shouldn't have thrown in that situation. I disagree as well. They should have absolutely thrown. My only gripe with it is that you've thrown to Monangai so little this year, and why not throw it to one of your better pass catchers in that situation? Just because up the middle, it's like that's a tough catch for anybody over your shoulder. The way it
Especially
was
for
thrown.
a guy that is that short.
Yeah, well,
right?
and he's like built. He's built like a rock. He's built like a rock, but can move like a gazelle. That's like his appeal as a runner. But it's so I just thought the actual play call to him in that situation was rough. But I do agree they had to throw the ball to score. You're not going to run it in 20. Once they got into the red zone, it was very difficult to run it. You got to be able to throw it. But anyway, excellent points as always. Let's just get into the Iowa game. I know, and I had a former Iowa player on this week, and he harped on it. I know you wanted to harp on it as well, because it does seem like this really could be the difference in the game, and that we're talking about special teams.
For sure. I mean, when you watch Iowa, they're Their field position is obviously crucial. They really struggle to put together long touchdown drives. Their game against Northwestern, their first score was set up by a block punt, and it was impressive because the guy who blocked it was being picked up by the back line of punt protection, and he just kind of willed himself through there and just shoved the guy back, got a hand up, and was able to tip that ball, setting them up for favorable field position. And then, of course, as we've already talked about on an earlier podcast, I think the Cooper DeJean punt return against Minnesota that was called back, if would have probably won that game for them too. If that happens, you're looking at an 8-2, or I'm sorry, what would they be? They'd be
8-1.
8-1 Iowa squad. Personally, I think that was correctly called a fair catch. And the reason I say that is because if you're the coverage team, as someone who's played on coverage, there's no way that you are going to go in guns blazing to tackle a guy if you think he might have called a fair catch, that if you hit him, you're going to give him 15 free yards and put them in field goal range. There's no way that you're going to do that in the modern game. And that was how we were coached, almost 20 years ago now when I was playing. So I think that was it looked to me like if there's any way possible that you're waving your arm, it's a fair catch. Now, that shouldn't take away from the fact that the guy is an amazing returner. We saw his interception return last year against Rutgers was a key difference in the game. You cannot let Iowa special teams beat you. Their kicker, their punter is one of the best punters in the nation, Torrey Taylor, again. He was considered by many even better than Adam Korsak, and he's still there. And then their kicker has been up and down. He missed a kick last week, but then he also hit a game-winning 50-plus yarder after Northwestern was basically celebrating like they had won the game because they forced a fourth down with 18 seconds left. And then their kicker just buries a 52-yarder that would have been good from 60. So, you cannot let their return game, field goal kicker, punter, anyone, gunners, anything. You cannot blow this game on special teams. And that's why I wanted to talk about it first, which is kind of what Jeffrey the Greek was saying. He thinks Iowa has a little bit of an advantage there. And you mentioned that it's pretty even except for the return game where Iowa is definitely stronger. I mean, I know you've already talked about this twice this week, but any other thoughts on special teams while we're just basically previewing the game?
Yeah, well, just going back to the DeJean fair catch, like I kind of looked at it as almost like checking your swing in baseball. It's like I felt like once he went just above the shoulder line, it's open to interpretation, and like you never should put yourself in that position. And check swings get poorly called all the time, but it's like once you get close, it's a split second decision. Like you said, that makes a lot of sense in terms of how the coverage team is reacting. But yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think this is just one of those games where I think any not fluke play, but any kind of like X factor play happens that could very easily be the difference. And whether that's a block punt, a deflected field goal attempt,
right.
I think on the reverse, this is very much. I feel like this could be a moment for Jay Patel because obviously, it's going to be hard to score points on Iowa. Patel's been, kind of under the radar, very steady this year, 11 of 13. Obviously, he had I don't know. Has anyone in Rutgers history ever made a 20, a 21, and a 22-yarder in the same game?
I mean,
if I had time, I'd look it up. But
maybe Keenan Startzel or Alex Falcinelli, maybe. But they don't even keep track like that.
Digging deep on those names. I love it. But yeah, so I mean, but he's been I think he's only missed one kick. He missed the 38-yarder on opening day that deflected off the post, and then he missed that 50-plus yarder Michigan. So every kick between 40 and 49 he's made. He's been super consistent. This is going to be the biggest any kick he has on Saturday, with the most pressure kick he's had in his career. So I'm really looking at him on how he's going to react to that. And then I just think in terms of the field position game, I feel like this is going to be truly like I'm not giving advice on gambling, but I would be shocked if the over hits in this game simply because I think both coaches are going to play it so conservatively, gambling on the fact that that one play is going to be the difference in who's going to get that one play. Maybe if that happens early, it opens up things later on, but I'm skeptical of that.
Yeah, I think it's a historically record low for the over-under. So But the thing is I don't bet really, but when I make the picks, especially at Off Tackle Empire, a lot of times it just comes down to a a lucky bounce early in the game so that
Yep.
one team has to kind of abandon their just pound strategy like early, and then sometimes you get a backdoor either cover or over from a late touchdown. I mean, come on, Ohio State hit the spread last week, and that was because they were just trying to get Marvin Harrison a touchdown, like when they should have been just running it into the line to get out of there with a victory, right? So
Yeah.
it's entirely possible that it hits the over. Like that's why I don't bet on stuff like that
Yeah.
because
It could be irregardless of the outcome of the game. It could just be,
right. And that's but I guess that kind of leads into an interesting point. And I guess let's talk about the Iowa offense now because that Cooper DeJean punt return against Minnesota, and I saw a good comment saying someone who was at the stadium said once that was ruled a fair catch, all they had to do was get 15 yards to get in field goal range. They're down 12-10 at home against Minnesota, who was shredded by Northwestern like right before that. So it's not like Minnesota's defense is as good as they've been last year. But nobody in the stadium had confidence that Iowa could move the ball 15 yards to set up a 50-yard field goal, which again he easily made last week against Northwestern. So that's the momentum is a huge part of what their offense does. I feel like their offensive line, like Jeffrey the Greek was saying, it's not bad. I saw by some metrics, at worst, they're the 7th best offensive line in the Big Ten. At worst, I mean, when you look at their Pro Football Focus ratings, and I know we kind of got away from that the last few weeks because we've actually been able to look at stats, but they have such a terrible offense. You're just trying to figure out like what the heck's going on. And basically, their center is ranked 4th best. Their guards are 3rd and 8th. Their tackle Dunker is ranked 14th, which still would make him a starting level Big Ten tackle. But Richmond is their other tackle, and he's ranked 2nd to last. So if there's a weak link on their offensive line, it's probably Richmond. I think he's number 78, especially in pass protection. So if they do have to pass, that is where they've been letting up a lot of pressure. But in the run game, I mean, they've been winning these games by either just running for big yards or a stat we talk about a lot with Rutgers is run success rate. So if it's 3rd and 1 and you get 2, that would be considered a successful run. If it's 3rd and 8 and you run for 2, that would not be considered a successful run. So their metrics are far from the bottom of the barrel when you look at that, which is an area that we've praised Rutgers for as well. Even in games where Rutgers' yards per carry might be around 4, their conversion on 3rd and short, particularly even 4th and short, is quite good. And Iowa is kind of a master at that. Otherwise, on their offense, their 2 best skill position players are hurt, which is, as you had in the other podcast, Lachey is out for the year, and Eric All, I think his name is, the other tight end, made some great plays, almost single-handedly won that game against Michigan State. And so they just don't have playmakers. I mean, even I think it's Williams. He had like it was Caleb Johnson had like a 67-yard touchdown run, which was their only touchdown in one of their other wins. He is ranked absolutely worst in the Big Ten as a running back. Worst. And that's when you have a line that I just mentioned is not one of the worst offensive lines, especially in the run blocking. And so if those are your 2 running backs, you got your 4th worst running back and the worst running backs in terms of ratings and yardage, pretty much. And then at wide receiver, their 3 receivers are bottom 5 in the Big Ten. Nationally, their 3 receivers are 938th, 941st, and 958th. Wow. So their best wide receiver is 941st best wide receiver in the nation. That is just insanely bad. And so what does this mean? Like, what can we take away from this? Well, one thing that I think is an underrated part of this game is the Iowa pass game. So they got Deacon Hill, who's their backup for Cade McNamara.
Right.
And it seems like he's been coached almost like we saw Evan Simon in that Temple game last year, where if the guy is not wide open, he throws it nowhere near the guy, like nowhere near him. So sometimes it's just high, sometimes it's out of bounds. It's as if they're purposely trying to throw incomplete. They don't want to risk any sort of turnover. And so you watch it and it's like, it's worse than watching the Jets or Giants, which is hard to say. It's literally more painful to watch than that because it's as if they're not trying to complete passes and all they're trying to do is get flags. They had more
Right.
penalty yardage on pass interference and defensive holding and illegal contact against Northwestern than they did actual passing yardage, and they won.
That's
So,
wild.
so it comes to this interesting question, like we talked about the Michigan State. Michigan State's defense, they kind of sit back off receivers. They don't press them, and then they kind of pick up opportunistic interceptions because they're almost baiting a quarterback into kind of throwing it in there. And so I don't know if Rutgers goes the route of like what they did against Ohio State, which is play press man coverage and like play tough, or if they almost slough off the receivers a little bit, not totally baiting them into throwing a pick, but if the throw is off target, the corner or the safety is not engaged with him to potentially make the play. I don't know what the game plan is. I think we've seen Rutgers play both ways. I think that their better strategy is to press up and don't let them get any momentum. But there is something to be said if your safeties can kind of hover around and pick off those terribly thrown balls. I mean, I don't think Jimmy the Greek talked about that at all, but like from a Rutgers pass defense standpoint, I think there's some options there. And I've seen teams play it both ways against Iowa, both of which worked. I mean, any thoughts on the Iowa pass game?
Yeah, I mean, well, what I was focusing on, what I was just trying to look up was turnover margin for both teams. I mean, Iowa's turned it over 6 more times than Rutgers has this year, so they've turned it over 14 times. Rutgers has only turned it over 8 times. So I really think it's I don't know. I mean, my biggest key is kind of simple in the fact that like whichever team can force a turnover and get a short field for their offensively challenged offense or their
Yeah.
challenged offense, that could very well be the difference. So if you force a fumble on their own 20, I mean, that could be the game right there. So
Right.
I think it's interesting because it's like you could argue Rutgers wouldn't have to play their best defensive game and they could still win. But I actually think they need to play their best defensive game because the margin for error is so thin that if you just have one bad play, that really could be the difference. And I think the challenge that they're going to have is, that Ohio State game was so physical. And can they bring that same physicality? Is there a little bit of a mental, emotional, physical hangover for this team? Offensive line as well. The way they were attacking Ohio State, obviously, it was a bit of a stomach punch in terms of how they lost. Are they able to regroup and just be able to have that same effort and energy and urgency in that game? Because I'm rambling a little bit, but to flip the script, it's like Rutgers ran against Ohio State and no one expected it. But
Right.
yet Vegas is saying there's no way they're basically saying there's no way they're going to do that against Iowa. But is it really that different?
Is it that they
And,
can't or is that they won't?
right. Well,
That's
again, I think this is definitely a game that Rutgers is going to throw less, right? And I think one key is and we know the one kind of I don't know if you call it weakness, but maybe the one issue that maybe Iowa defense you could say has is the edge rushers, right? So can you get Wimsett off the edge the way they did against Indiana on that run? Like that, like one run like that could be the difference. So I think
Yeah.
the chess match in this game for me is like fascinating. I love it. And in terms of the Iowa offense, yeah, I think can the front four get consistent pressure? How much are we going to see safety blitzes? I think we're going to see some at some point. But you're right. Like all it takes is a bad Deacon Hill pass, and I think Rutgers is good enough to be able to capitalize on that. So is this a game? Talking about Cooper DeJean, with that run back last year, is this a game that Shaquan Loyal, who has had some great returns in his career of interceptions, that would be huge too. So I just think it's
Yeah.
even though it might not be a very exciting game, I feel like it's going to be such a tense on the edge of your seat game because you're looking for that one or two plays that's going to decide the game.
Right. Well, that's where if you want to just wrap up with Iowa's offense, right? They've won games where he threw for 37 yards and 65 yards. I mean, that's Rutgers 1 passing yard, 8 passing yard type territory.
How many attempts do you know?
I don't have it off the top of my head. One of them, I
Yeah.
think he only had 10.
Yeah, I figured. I know he's got games between 10 and 15.
Yeah. So, and I mean, he's doing us a favor because by his completion percentage is lower than Gavin Wimsatt. So he's not the worst in the country or in the conference. With
David, can
completion.
you imagine the fallout for if a Bryant Ferentz led offense has like a career day? and they
Um,
score like 25, 28 points, it's going to be brutal because you
well,
don't want
let's
to be
talk
that
about
team.
let's just real quick, like how do they score? So how do they score? Well, first of all, there's been talking about Cooper DeJean playing as like a wildcat quarterback because it can't be any worse. So there's
Yeah,
that. You have to be ready for that. The second is in the run game, just like they are a little bit vulnerable to those perimeter runs. I think Iowa's offensive line is very sound. Like when they're blocking down and flowing to the side, they're really good at using angles. And so this is where like we talk about, like, for example, like Virginia Tech being poor at their defensive line, like their line alignment on linebacker and safety. Coming the Rutgers safeties and linebackers have to be on point with their lanes, because that's where Iowa beats you, is that they run these like almost like diagonal runs. They're not really to the perimeter, but they're not really in the middle, and they know how to use the angles, and you cannot be like missing your lane, or that's how they generate yardage. And then the other thing that they're starting to do more of is play action. So even though their passing is not successful, and we've seen a lot more data in the NFL on this than in college, it doesn't actually matter how successful you are at running the ball. It has very little impact as your success in play action. However, they're averaging 3.7 yards per play on pocket passes, and they're averaging 6.1 on play action. So I don't know if that's because defenses are just sucking up on the run because they're expecting it so much, or if there's actually something that Deacon Hill, almost like you see some NFL quarterbacks like a Zach Wilson, where he has actually better off when he has less time to think about what he's doing, and he just fakes the handoff, turns around and throws it, or just makes a play. I'm not sure. I haven't. It's hard to tell what's going on with him, even in his head, but it's entirely possible that you see Wildcat, you see a lot of play action, and that they're just going to try to pound you with those runs kind of between guard and tackle, where they're hoping that someone makes a mistake in their pursuit angle. Like that's how the Iowa offense does move the ball when they have it. And when they get a short field and they only need one or two first down conversions, they have been able to use that momentum to their advantage. I mean, they're converting 27% of third downs. It's awful.
yeah, yeah.
Overall, I mean, and a lot of them are third and shorts, which is that has to be the worst in the country. There's no way anyone's worse than that. I wouldn't think. So that's what you have to be aware of as a defensive game planner. So in the pass game, it's easier to have those run lanes filled if you play press man coverage and bring a safety down and just trust your guys,
Hmm.
right? So to your point though, if you do get burned on like one big pass play and single coverage, do you change your strategy? Do you just say, oh, chalk that up to they practice football too? I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see what that chess match is. Boring for everyone who's not really paying attention, but for anybody who's kind of like can watch a 2-1 baseball game and like be really
Yeah,
think it's interesting, this could be like that.
yeah,
Any
for
other thoughts
sure.
on the Iowa offense before we flip the script?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna add to that in the sense of, I think the first quarter is everything. I mean, we've seen the Rutgers defense, come out a little flat, against Indiana and Michigan State. Ohio State scored on the second possession, I believe, which the defense did inherit a short field. It wasn't their fault, but um, setting the tone from the first time they're on the field, I think is huge. And Yeah, you want to talk about the Rutgers offense now?
Sure. The last thing I'll mention about Iowa is that even though
Yeah.
their best two tight ends are out, their number 3 tight end is ranked 9th in Pro Football Focus, and I think his name is Stylianos.
Is that
Um,
overall or is that for blocking, receiving?
for overall in the Big Ten, he's ranked 9th,
Wow.
all
Yeah,
around.
well, tight end you.
Right. So that's where um, they might go play action and try to throw it to him, because you got to expect their tight ends are blocking. So there's definitely an opportunity for him to leak out, and you got to cover him. And
Yeah,
this
in
is
the middle of
where
the field. That'd be scary.
if you had Tyrene Powell, you'd feel a lot more confident, right?
Yeah.
Mo
Well,
Toure is made a nice interception last week, but that's not really his game. I mean, we have seen him make
right.
that interception, that one against Purdue early in his career, but like they're gonna try to find their tight end, even their other tight ends. Like clearly they have depth there, even though their top two guys are out. And on the
Well,
flip side, or go ahead.
no, go ahead.
On the flip side, we have talked about this. Jimmy mentioned it on your podcast that Iowa is particularly vulnerable to tight end play. They've been victimized by opposing tight ends several times. A big play in that Michigan State Iowa game was when Malik Carr was injured, because he was carving him up before that. And then also There was another couple games where I think there's one other game when I watched. I'm not sure if it was Minnesota. I think it maybe was, because Minnesota's tight ends last year were the best in the conference, like we talked about during the beginning of the season under Soraka. This year they'd actually been the worst, but they kind of came alive a little bit against Iowa, if I'm remembering right. And so there's opportunity for tight ends to beat them. We have not seen much of that from the Rutgers offense. So kind of like we talked about the pick your poison on defense, on offense, it's like, do we introduce things that we haven't done all season, or do we try to just stick with the run game? Like you were mentioning, Rutgers did it against Ohio State. They're going to pass less. Do they just keep pounding it until they can't pound it anymore? My thought would be probably, even though the weakness of this Iowa defense is, yeah, those tight ends. And then the other thing they're vulnerable to is the same thing that they do on offense, which is those runs where you kind of change their perspective or change the angles. So they have been susceptible to quarterback runs, like you said, where Wimsatt might be able to get to the outside like he did against Indiana. And if you can change the geometry, basically, of what the defense is doing, and it's a little harder to know exactly what your assignment and exactly what angle to take. Because if you just run at these guys and they know where they need to be, they're going to stop you. Unless, again, you can wear them down like we saw last week with Ohio State. Rutgers had a lot of that success just pounding it late in the game because they were wearing down Ohio State. And Iowa's no different. But if you can get to the outside and they have to kind of make decisions about, okay, where do I need to be? Then that's one way to get there. And this works on passing plays as well. Their defensive backs, Sebastian Castro, is actually rated higher than Cooper DeJean. He's the number one rated cornerback in the Big Ten. He might even be third nationally. Castro this year, he's been amazing. But how do you beat any cornerback that's that good? Well, you change the angle that they're covering, right? So if you're a receiver and he thinks it's an in-breaking route, but then your quarterback rolls outside, there's no way any cornerback can stay with it if you have a little bit of speed. So that's a place where if you can change where they're looking, you're going to have to protect the edge so that there's no free rushers coming at Wimsatt. But if he can get to the outside, he should be able to run or pass successfully. And those are kind of the ways you can beat their defense. But the question is, how much do you do that and open yourself up to, a sack or a negative play on the perimeter versus just keeping him safe in the middle? And that'll be really interesting to see what happens with that.
2 points on that. First off, I think that's one of the best things that Monangai does, is being able to spurt out the, off the edge, where a play maybe is even going up the middle, and the way he's able to bounce off like he did against Virginia Tech, like he did against Michigan State in those big TD runs. So I think that's encouraging and a great point that you made in terms of how potentially they could run off of Iowa. And then the other thing, I just wanted to go back to what you were saying about, we know that they're, digesting film. And what did Rutgers have a weakness in against Ohio State? And that was, covering Trayvon Henderson with a linebacker in the middle of the field. Not saying Iowa would necessarily use a running back in that situation, but maybe they attack that same type of, situation with a tight end to try to get a linebacker in a bad angle again. So I think that's curious. I think tight ends up the middle is definitely a vulnerability that, something to watch for. But then on the flip side, you're right. I think that Rutgers could getting off that edge with Wimsatt or Monangai, I think is really huge. And then I've said it like a broken record, but I feel like this is also a game that you can incorporate Aaron Young in some way, because I feel like the way he can move and also catch passes out of the backfield can create a different look. And it really hasn't been something they've used in a few weeks now.
Yeah. When we talk about it, right? Iowa, for example, they beat Rutgers last year, completing one pass to a wide receiver. Like that's just how it is. On the Rutgers side, I like both, like what you said, Monangai and Aaron Young. I think they have really good vision on those long stretch plays to the outside that if you can protect like long enough and you can get them that place, like Young had that really nice touchdown in the bowl game where it was like that, where he kind of ran to the outside and it was kind of like chaos. And it was almost like a return in terms of how much space there was. Similarly, I think was it Monangai had that touchdown against Syracuse 2 years ago in the same exact way, where it was kind of like almost, I don't know if it's a toss, but it looked like a toss play in terms of how it worked itself out. And I feel like Rutgers has the ability to get out there, especially when, I mean, Gus Zielinskis and Brian Felter, the reason that they were not projected as starters in the beginning is they're a little bit more limited in size, but they have good mobility. So there's a good chance that you could see Rutgers kind of doing that same thing when they have the ball, is trying to get to the outside. But again, the question is, do you risk negative plays versus if you think you can run up the middle and get 2 yards and stay closer to or fully on schedule? But I do think that this, to your point, this is an Aaron Young possible game. It's also a Sam Brown game because I think he can, when healthy, he can kind of stiff arm guys a little bit better and get to the outside. He doesn't need like a free lane like an Aaron Young more so does because of his size to get to that perimeter. Sam Brown, we've seen him kind of like almost use his acceleration to get a little extra step where they're expecting it like a big blow. And then he, rather than lowering his shoulder, he just kind of stiff arms, not full power, but just stiff arms enough to then get to the outside. There might be an opportunity for that as well. I think there's a lot of different things that Rutgers can do in the run game, assuming that they can hold the defensive ends from Iowa, because as weak as they might be in pass rush, they are not weak in run support at all. So that's going to be, can they hold the point of attack on the outside, or can you blow up those guys who are trying to set the edge on defense? All of these things could happen. It's going to be really interesting to watch how that goes.
All right. So my last question, and then your final thoughts. What's more of a risk? The game plan of just being fully committed to the run with the idea that you're eventually going to wear down the will and the Iowa defense with the run game, which is extremely hard to do, or actually take some chances here and there, thinking that maybe that isn't going to happen no matter what you do. And then your final thoughts.
Well, I would say, and we didn't talk about this on the Ohio State preview, but one thing that Ohio State was doing poorly earlier in the year, and I think they really did a better job against Rutgers, was not telegraphing the run. When Ohio State was playing Wisconsin, watching on TV, we could tell when they were going to run almost every time on first down. Like, it just looked like a run. And so there's two things to do with that. One is play action. And two is you jazz it up a little bit so that it doesn't look like an obvious run. And that's one thing the Iowa offense does really well. They'll go trips right, but they'll run the exact same play as they would do with, 12 personnel. Like, they do a really good job of dressing up the play, even though it's literally the same play. It just looks different from the outside. And so the alignment, it doesn't really impact you. Like, when I play defensive end, like, it didn't really impact me if there was receivers to the left or to the right. Like, I'm very focused on what's happening inside the tackle box. And so I think Rutgers might employ some of the same things where, I mean, Iowa's got the number 2 and number 5 ranked linebackers, and their safeties are ranked like 3rd and 12th in the Big Ten. So they've got guys who would be a number 1 linebacker, 2 guys who would be a number 1 linebacker on a Big Ten team, and 2 safeties who would be the number 1 safety on a Big Ten team. So I don't think just running up the gut is going to work. I think you're going to have to scheme guys a little bit open. And I know we are harping on this Monangai play against Ohio State, but like, that idea of surprising them with something where they thought he's lead blocking. So if he's lead blocking, then Wimsatt's going to run. So try to defeat him and then let him go because he's a blocker. Like, those type of plays can work. A tight end leaking out, plays like that. I think to get the receivers going, we're going to have to do what we said. You're going to have to get a rollout, and the guy's going to have to like kind of do like a comeback route, but not with the quarterback in the pocket. It's going to have to be outside, so you get an extra like half second or half step to feed that ball. But tight ends and running backs, everything's on the table in this game. I mean, do I think Rutgers can break the Iowa will? Not really, because nothing has broken their will this year other than their game against Penn State.
Yep.
But conversely, it's going to be very hard to break the will of Rutgers. So, I mean, I guess my final thought is that now that I live in ACC country, having lived in SEC country, and living in Pac-12 country before, I mean, it's like Am I excited for this game? Yes. Would it be more fun if I was excited for a game that probably was going to be 24-21 than 10-9? Yes. I mean, I think that what'll be interesting to see is if one team goes up early, like 10-0, and
Yeah,
then sometimes the worst thing that can happen is you go up 10-0, and then the other team is like, all right, we got to just start doing stuff that
yeah.
is, stretching them out. Defense is backing off. They're playing cover two. Then you start getting something going. Now it's 10-7, and you have all the momentum. That'll be interesting to see. Um, Honestly, I don't know how Soraka is going to do it. That's what I was actually trying to look up is what he did last year against Iowa in that game when he was at Minnesota. It looks like they beat Minnesota 13-10. So whatever Soraka did last year didn't work, I guess, against Iowa defense.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. I think Rutgers going to try, if I had to make my best guess, of just doing what they did against Ohio State, because both defenses are quite similar in Ohio State and Iowa. You try to wear them down a little bit, and then even if you don't score points early, you have a shot that maybe that pays dividends down the line. I guess that's the best guess that I have. And then I think he'll have a couple plays schemed up that they're going to go to in a key spot, just like he did last week, where if the opportunity presents itself and you can go maybe play, we got two receivers right, and they kind of cut inside, and it lets a tight end flare out to the side outside, and maybe you get up a tight end against a corner and you have a size advantage. Maybe some plays like that, fairly. It's risky, but it's a play that you've been practicing all week that kind of makes you feel a little bit more confident. I feel like that's what they're going to do. And then if Iowa does present themselves with corners are playing back and they're giving you that 6-yard out route, let's say it's 2nd and 10. I think Wimsatt has shown enough that he can throw those routes unless Iowa starts jumping him, which it's not really their style to jump. Last comment is just remember before the season we talked about how much does Rutgers have to almost sell out to force turnovers versus just playing sound defense and get turnovers.
Hmm.
For the most part, Iowa just plays sound defense and gets turnovers. It's not really their style to gamble for interceptions. So I think that those plays might be available. Like if you see a corner playing back, you probably are going to be able to complete that ball unless they, smartly before the play are changing things up. I mean, their corners understand receiver route trees better than often the opposing receivers do. And so if you play it like if they can read the exact route you're running, then they're going to jump it. And so maybe there's going to be some variability there. I mean, that'll be really interesting to see. Like, I don't think I was going to feel like they have to gamble defensively to win this game unless Rutgers goes up by a few points. And then it might get interesting. And then we
Yeah,
might have like we had last year where it was higher scoring than anyone expected.
Yeah, those are all excellent points. I think, yeah, the dynamic of, I think your point of if someone gets out to an unexpected lead early, the other team potentially having an advantage where they're opening things up because it's not necessarily what you've been planning against, right, all week. You're kind of preparing for this conservative, run first approach. And then if someone their hand is forced to have to open up things, it does make it more interesting. I honestly would be thrilled with like if it's 3-3 in the third quarter because I think it would be so much more interesting to see. All right, who's going to make the first move? Who's going to adjust here? How long are they going to go until
Rutgers is up 21-0 in the third quarter? Like that's
well,
really
yeah, of course, but I am talking in terms.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Because yes, I hope Rutgers is up 21-0, but I think it would be a fascinating tell from a coaching perspective to see how Rutgers is going to handle that situation. I just think it would be really interesting to see. I also just before you mentioned, and I think it's a great point, and yes, Jeffrey the Greek did mention him, Johnny Langan. This is definitely a game. I thought that catch he made and the play he made against Ohio State was excellent in terms of near the goal line, and then his blocking has been tremendous, and he's definitely a candidate that could leak out off a block. So I would love to see him get more involved. I mean, Bowman, they barely thrown to, but, that would be really interesting to see. And then I think, yeah, it's just a matter of who flinches first, who puts the ball on the ground, who makes a key mistake, whose lack of focus. I think one thing that hasn't been talked about at all is that this is one of the toughest places to play in the country. Iowa has a great home field advantage. So I think, Rutgers coming off of that game against Ohio State, going into this type of environment, the focus level obviously has to be elite, and they can't avoid any mental mistakes because that absolutely could make the difference.
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of that comes to the coaching staff, right? They have these guys prepared. I was looking back at Soraka, so I said that Minnesota lost Iowa last year. They lost to them even in that magical 2019 season when Minnesota lost, it looks like 23-19. And then when he was at Penn State, they lost to Iowa 41-21 in 2020. So Soraka is, I guess, 0-3. And so maybe there's a little extra motivation there. Maybe he'll try something differently, or maybe Ferentz has his number. I don't know. I think, and the other thing to keep in mind, I just want to make our listeners clear. If Rutgers goes down 10-0, and we say open things up, it doesn't necessarily mean passing, because what often happens is that then a defense, instead of putting 8 in the box, they put 7. And now you're running against 7 guys. So then maybe you can run like a little bit more to the perimeter, or you're getting extra yards on the same exact play. It's not really opening things up like they're going to start chucking down 10-0. No, they have to be down like 17 points, I would say, before they start really chucking it like that. And Iowa's defense is not going to commit pass interference. They're not. Like, if you want to say the difference, I would say, why do I think Iowa's secondary is a little bit better than Rutgers? That's why. Rutgers they have been flagged a few times, and Iowa really doesn't. They really don't in pass coverage. So, again, I would say my last thing is like 50% chance of Rutgers winning. Absolutely. I think that their ceiling is much higher than Iowa. If they play well, they will win. I think if Rutgers plays below average, I think Iowa's floor is higher, and they're at home, and they just know they've been in so many of these close games. We've been praising Rutgers for winning one close game against Michigan State. The rest of their games have not been close, right? Like, I guess you could say Virginia Tech was a little bit close, but then it was 35-16, just like the Ohio State in reverse. Like, not really a close game for 4 quarters. Whereas Iowa, they are used to this. Their fans are used to this. And so if you can get a little bit of a margin, I'm not sure if they have the firepower to come back against it. And so that's where, I think if Rutgers plays a good game, they'll win. Regardless of what Iowa does.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think Rutgers needing to either be tied or with the lead in the fourth quarter is key. Obviously, they could be down 1 score and come back. But, my last point was, and everybody gets upset every week, and I'm not denying that there aren't bad calls, but I just have a different attitude in it. Like, I feel like I never expect Rutgers to get the benefit of the doubt with the Big Ten officiating crew. I think not until they start winning, they're going to have to win games by overcoming the officiating. It's just, that's what's going to have to happen. They're not going to get the calls in Iowa City that you think they should get. I'm not saying they're going to get blatantly screwed, but they have to be able to react and handle that adversity. I think it's definitely going to happen. And it's a matter of, are they able to overcome that? I don't think there's ever going to be a game that Rutgers is going to be able to win saying, they got all the calls. It's just never going to happen. And they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt that Iowa is going to get. It's just not going to happen.
You got to keep in mind, right, as a fan, just think about why did the Pac-12 get destroyed? It's because they couldn't get enough teams to the college football playoff. So there's, again, this isn't like a conspiracy like the NFL where they literally don't have to call it fair. But in college, Big Ten wants an undefeated Michigan and undefeated Ohio State one of them to the conference title game, and they want one of those teams to play a team with a good record from the West. So if again, I don't think this game is going to be, quote, rigged, because I don't think college they do that. But if it's a close call in Iowa City, there could
Rutgers
be
is not getting that call. They're not.
There's a tendency that, you want Iowa. If you're the Big Ten, you want Iowa to have a better record so that if they end up in the Big Ten title game, it looks like a better game. Even though, Ohio State and Michigan also played Rutgers. At the end of the year, that number next to their name, people are going to be like, Big Ten title game. They don't want 6-6, they don't want 7-5 Iowa against like Michigan, and then it being a close game, and then something weird happens. Like, they don't want that. And so again, I am not saying it's rigged. I could have a talk all day about the NFL, but in college, I don't think it's rigged. But you're not getting a 50-50 call in
No,
Iowa City. You cannot bank on that.
no, no. I don't think you're going to get a 40-60 call. Like I think it's
Right.
just like it's just not going to happen. And everyone harps every week on 4 or 5 blatantly missed calls. And first of all, I think it's just human error is part of it. The collegiate officials are not.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
they're insurance salesmen. They're card like they're real people, right?
Right.
So I think sometimes the idea that like they're getting screwed, it's just they just make a mistake. Like it's just a bad mistake. It happens. This isn't their full time career job. But on the flip side, I think I think Rutgers has it's not about, and I'm not saying the team thinks this, but it's like you have to expect for things to go wrong. You have to expect that adversity, and I think Chiana prepares them mentally for that because that's why they're so tough, and that's why you have to chop through it, and that's the whole mentality of that because they're going to have calls go against them on Saturday. They have to be able to
Right.
overcome that to win.
And even then, I would say in the aggregate, I think officiating as a whole has been even, if not slightly better for Rutgers this year. There are plenty of
Yes,
calls that they've gotten this year that I'm like, there's no way they get that last year.
I agree. I
And
agree.
so, they almost called that Ian Strong one a touchdown. I'm like, there's
Yep.
no way. That's not a touchdown. Like, as I wish it was a touchdown, but I'm
Yeah.
like, that should not even be reviewed. It was so obviously an incompletion.
Yeah.
And so
It was a
those,
great try. I mean, he almost had it.
I know. And if he does catch that, it's amazing, right? The 28-23,
Yeah.
like upset alert, like everybody's phone's blowing up with upset alert. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So again, I don't want to harp too much. As a former just intramural official and soccer ref, football, basketball, I ref every sport except volleyball. Like, it's hard. Like,
Yeah.
and so some of them are just that, and then some of them are, you know, just questionable, and it could go either way. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
so.
when you have 80 or 90,000 Iowans screaming at you,
Well, that's
that
why we're
doesn't.
saying basketball. Don't play to win by 2. Play to win by 10. And I think
Yeah,
Rutgers, has to have that mentality in this game.
yeah, yep.
So.
All right, David Anderson, really appreciate it. We went longer than expected, but I think it was worth it. And thanks for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful.